Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome. We are going to give folks a few minutes to join us. And then we're going to get started. Zakia and I are excited to be with you all today. And while we're letting everyone get in, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you set the setting to everyone, then everyone can see you, or you can just send it to Zakia and I, also fine. But let us know your name and pronouns, where you're calling in from, what organization you're with, if any, in the chat. And we'll get started at like 4 past while we let folks trickle in. But I really need a little more. Apparently, I need a little more coffee to like amp up the energy here. So great to see you all. Got folks calling in from environmental groups, utilities. We got some journalists. I actually hadn't thought about that, but I'm sure reporters, you get a ton of trolls as you're sharing your articles. So hopefully this will be really useful for that as well. Nice to see everyone. Give it one more minute. I was trying to get my music going so there'd be a little like intro song, but my Spotify wasn't logged in, and then I didn't start early enough to figure it out before we needed to start. So here we are. Cool. Just one more minute, and then Zakia and I will introduce ourselves. Nice to see you all. Okay. All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. We're recording this, and so we will share out the recording after the fact. Zakia, who will introduce herself in a second, has put the resource for this digital detox, taming trolls, whatever other alliteration you want to add, into the chat. Our presentation is based on this document, so please don't feel like you need to take notes. It is all in there, and we are recording this, so hopefully that means we can just be present today. And we're gonna present for about 25-30 minutes. And then we'll have a lot of time for discussion and Q&A. If things come up during our presentation that you just like want to share an experience that you've had, or have like a really pertinent question, feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat. We'll try to address them as we can, or we'll get to them at the end. Yeah, so to start, thank you for joining our digital detox training. Just a little bit about the Water Hub before I go into Zakia and I's introductions. The Water Hub is a pro bono communications organization that works to make water communicators more effective, to provide resources for the water community so we can advance water solutions. We do that by offering free webinars like this, as well as also providing other pro bono support for water justice organizations. We folks might have seen, if you're on our newsletter list, that we sent out an announcement on Monday that unfortunately we've been a project of Climate Nexus for the last 5 years. And unfortunately, Climate Nexus is going to be closing its doors at the end of this month, which is a really sad time. So if you have any great openings for environmental communicators, please reach out and look at our colleagues. But in good news, after many months of working on this, the Water Hub is actually going to be spinning out as an independent organization and continuing to operate at a new fiscal home starting in July. So for those of you who are already getting our newsletter or know how to reach us online, our socials, our website, waterhub.org is all staying the same. In fun news, our emails will change a little bit. So we'll be name@waterhub.org and starting in July, but we'll send out an email to folks in our network and share that online so you know how to get a hold of us. So let me get into who we are as individuals. So my name's Sarah Bucci. I'm realizing my little name tag on here says the Water Hub. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications. Here I live in Denver, Colorado, and I've been working on environmental advocacy and organizing and communications for the last 15 years. And let me pass it over to my colleague, Zakia.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I am Zakia Taylor. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am the communications manager for the Water Hub. I'm based in Greensboro, North Carolina. Shout out to the South. And I've been working in digital advocacy and organizing for about 3 years now.
Awesome. So I'm going to take the first half of the presentation and then I'm going to hand it over to Zakia for the second half. Just to give you an idea of what we want to cover today, these trolls might look cute. We have a lot of very cute and fun gifts in our work today. But in real life, they can be a drain on our time, our energy reserves, our resources, if I'm being honest, like our mental health. And so we're hoping that people leave today's training with an understanding of the need for having some community guidelines for yourself or for your organization. We're also going to be sharing a helpful guide to figure out when it's worth the time and energy to have meaningful discourse online versus when it's better to befriend the block button. And we're also going to have some polls to get a sense of how folks are seeing this in their real life. And then again, as I said, plenty of time for discussion and questions. So social media platforms are becoming more contentious. This isn't just an anecdote, even though this is obviously like a very super scientific chart on here. But there are organizations out there that are studying this, like the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and they have found that our kind of lived experience plays out in the data. Moderation on social media platforms is on the decline. Hate speech is on the rise. Trolls and bots are on the rise. So this is something we are having to deal with. It's troubling because as communicators or nonprofit organizations, government institutions, utilities, journalists, I mean, social media is one of the really important ways that we can directly connect with our audience and engage with decision makers. And so it's really important that we have a strategy for community engagement that protects our organization, protects our staff. And I like to think about this as like a lifeboat. Like it's the kind of thing, hopefully you don't need to use very often, but you should definitely have just in case. And it makes it a lot easier to deal with issues when they arise. Okay, so I need to swap over to my Slido really quick, and we're going to do some polls. All right, so on here, if you can go to using this QR code on your phone, or you can go to slido.com and enter this 7-digit number 4385647. It's going to take you to a couple of questions that we have, and we wanted to get a sense of how often people are engaging with our questions. On this one is, how often does your organization or individual encounter negative engagement on social media? The next two are going to be positive, and then our last one's going to be like bots and thoughts kind of question. As we just wanted to get a sense daily. All right. I think it varies. I know it can vary quite widely depending on reach and virality. I'm not saying that one right. All right. It seems like there's maybe a rare soul who doesn't encounter this online at all. Bless you. I'm so happy for you. But for the most part, this is something people are dealing with, negative interactions online, pretty regularly, at least every couple of months, but for many people, at least every week, or as we can see, maybe even every day. All right. Our next question is, how often do you encounter positive engagement on your social media channels? I like seeing there's something very satisfying about seeing the results pop up. So I hope other people enjoy that as well. Okay. So still some rare, not a ton of engagement, but for most folks, it seems like often as well. So we're getting both, which is kind of nice. At least it's not all negative. I'd say this is probably pretty true for us as well. And it's one of those things where, like, what a lot of us are trying to do is get just engagement in our channels. And so how can we make sure we're like inviting the positive and addressing the negative in constructive ways? All right, now I'm curious about just like the bots, trolls, like not even people having like any discourse, maybe not even real people, but just like random stuff or ads or copy pastes pretty regularly as well. Okay. This makes sense to me. It also probably, I guess, if you were interested in attending this session, it makes sense that you're doing so because this is something that you are dealing with. Great. Thank you all so much for giving us that sense of what your day-to-days for yourself or your organization online are like. I'm going to move back. And this is my last slide, and then I get to hand it over to Zakia. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of engagement people are trying to deal with, both really positive, some negative, some spammy. So that's exactly what we're here to talk about. And one of the first things we can do is have an actual community guideline that's well defined for ourselves or for our organizations. It's a pretty simple sentence, this example. Our community values respectful and constructive dialogue. We don't tolerate personal attacks, hate speech, or misinformation. Violators may face warnings, be suspended from commenting, or banned based on the severity. This isn't necessarily something that you need to have like posted online. It could be something that's kind of internal policy for your organization that the people managing the social media accounts have. If you are that person and this isn't something that you have, I think it would be a good idea to run up the flagpole, so to speak, and suggest because it can be nice to have something that you can official that you can kind of point to, which we'll get to a little later if you are dealing with kind of disingenuous hate speech or misinformation. Um, if your organization has a lot of forums that's part of your work, like you have community groups or Facebook groups, this is the kind of thing that if you don't already is good to have as a, like kind of a publicly posted policy. It makes moderation a lot easier. I'm sure this is something Ziki can talk to. She has a lot of experience with this. So anyway, I sort of think about this as like our first line of defense is just like having a policy. It can be really as simple as this. And we're going to talk about how you can use that when you're thinking about how you reply and respond to different engagements online. And now I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Sarah. So this next section of our presentation will be a bit information dense, but we have already compiled it into a free resource so you can review or follow along, and I'll drop it again in the chat here. So as spam accounts and bots are on the rise across social media platforms, maintaining a healthy and productive online community starts with distinguishing between human users and automated bots or trolls. To differentiate between the two, we can use what I like to call the Turing test for trolls. So on the screen, there's an example of the same tweet being posted by multiple spam accounts. It reads, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I've joined the BLM protests months ago when they began. They opened my eyes wide. I didn't realize I became a Marxist. It happened without me even knowing it. I'm done with this trash. I will be registering Republican, giving Twitter a shot. So these accounts, if you notice, all have a very similar sort of Pepe the Frog-esque spam profile picture that is a dead giveaway. And while the posts are phrased in a way that makes them seem like a human interaction, they really aren't. There are a couple of keywords that are being used very strategically here. So when you see a new comment, first take a look at the account's profile. Do they have a bio or a profile picture? Genuine social media users typically provide some information about themselves to connect with others. And a blank or sparse profile is a good starting point for further investigation. If you're still suspicious about the profile, you can check out the content that the account actually shares. Spam accounts and bots are notorious for repetitive behavior. Their engagements are often copy-paste responses like the example, or they use the same keywords in all of their tweets. They might overuse hashtags to increase their visibility, or they reply to the same person or group of people constantly. Genuine human users may be passionate about a specific topic, but there's usually a little more diversity in their posts and replies if they're a real person. And building from that repetitive behavior, accounts that are either spam, bot, or troll have a habit of only engaging with hot topics or trending issues. If the replies from the account are argumentative or malicious or non-constructive, engagement really isn't recommended. I always encourage you to trust your instincts. If something feels off about an account, protecting your online community from trolls and bots is really essential for fostering a safe and engaging online environment. So now that you've done the Turing test for trolls and you've come to the conclusion that the account engaging with your content or community is a real person, what's next? In my own experience of managing social media for a rural community-based organization, I find that online interactions are largely based on both the connectedness to the organization's values and work and their receptivity to your cause. So the people that organizations connect with online all have their own different reasons for engaging with an organization's account or content. Some people are emotionally invested. Some people are invested because of their morals and principles. Some are just fact driven. And some people just want to derail your online environment. So on the screen is our Real People Engagement Guide, which profiles the types of people you may run into online. Firstly, there's people who are emotionally invested and receptive to your work. Then there are people who don't have emotional investment who are still receptive. And these two profiles at the top will generally be your most supportive interactions. On the bottom, we have those who are emotionally impacted or invested, but not receptive. And finally, we just have folks who are trolling. We'll get into each category deeper in the next few slides. So the first category of our Real People Engagement Guide are the folks who are emotionally impacted or invested in your message and receptive. These are folks who aren't just casually interested in your organization. They're likely to be the survey takers, the common commenters, the post sharers, even the volunteer sign up form responders. The best way to engage with folks in this category are to keep the good vibes rolling. If they leave a comment that feels personal or value driven, reply in a way that reaffirms your shared values. The key here is empathy. These are the folks that can be some of your most passionate and supportive advocates, so it's very important to make them feel valued and heard. And on the screen, we have a sample response that reads, "We understand your passion and share your commitment to this cause. Your input is valuable, and we appreciate your dedication to making a positive impact." Moving to the next category, some people are not emotionally invested in a cause just yet, but they're still happy to hear you out. They're the type of person to be motivated by what makes sense to them or what seems logical or rational. They appreciate fact-driven discourse and value a well-reasoned statement and would rather learn something new than to necessarily be emotionally moved. So how do we engage with them effectively? Luckily, this type of person doesn't usually seek to derail a conversation in a negative way. They may ask a probing question or pose a counterpoint, but they're curious and they inquire in good faith. The key here is to provide facts and data. Using case studies, statistics, or additional specialized knowledge about your work encourages a constructive conversation. If you can teach that person something new about the community they live in or connect their lived experience to your work, that's a successful interaction. And for the sample, thank you for raising this point. Here's an alternative perspective that considers additional information that you might have. What do you think? Next, we have folks that are emotionally impacted or invested in your work, but aren't receptive to your message yet. In my own experience, I was the digital point person at a rural progressive organization. We did year-round voter engagement out in the sticks in North Carolina. And many of our social media accounts were on Facebook and very, very localized to the counties that we worked in, which made for many contentious moments in our online community. Proximity to your online community deeply impacts how people will receive your messaging. And sometimes that means that people who are directly impacted by your work may still oppose your message because of an inherent bias or a cultural norm. Engagement with this type of person can be a bit tricky, but there's still a possibility for productive conversations. So if you do choose to reply to this type of account and the conversation is getting increasingly unproductive, I'd recommend that you disengage. This sample on the screen is a good example of a kind but firm response that still affirms values. It reads, "We appreciate your passion and we're here for constructive dialogue." And then a suggestion to restate your values, to end the conversation, and disengaging from replying with further comments. Finally, we have the trolls. They may have passed the Turing test, but they're still not interested in a productive conversation. These are individuals who solely seek to provoke or disrupt or derail. They can either engage directly with you or with members of your online community. They may tag you maliciously or otherwise try to gain control of your online presence. There's no sample statement here. The best thing to do with a troll is to block them, especially if they've gone against your established community guidelines. Engagement is not recommended at all. Furthermore, if the comments that they make violate a social media platform's code of conduct or their rules, I wouldn't recommend reporting them. The response from social media platforms tends to be very lackluster these days, but the less trolls, the better. So now that you know how to find the bots and the who's who in your online community, the final piece is to apply our 7 principles to cultivating social media engagements that affirm your values and shape your online community. So firstly, before engaging with a comment, you always want to define your engagement goals. With every interaction, you decide what resolution looks like. Are you trying to persuade them? Is there an inappropriate comment to manage? Are you restating your values? Having a clear objective guides your interaction. Secondly, always lead with empathy. When engaging with real people, acknowledge emotions such as anger or fear or frustration. There's always time for demonstrating empathy and understanding, and it builds trust with your online community. You can shape the online community you want by modeling your values. Connect through storytelling. Social media is a tool for narrative change as well, and storytelling brings people together. If you have an organizational story to share, share it with those folks online who are curious and open. Always restate your positions for visibility. Whether folks directly engage with you or not, you are always being seen via your social media presence, and you should be seen being committed to your values and your cause. You never know how your people might find you. And in cases where persuasion of the person may seem unlikely, consider responding to restate your position and maybe drive traffic to an appropriate link on your website for folks who are curious to learn more. When you're aiming to persuade, be strategic. Focus on presenting your position with clarity and supporting information. Be mindful of fostering constructive dialogue rather than escalating disagreements. Define what a safe space means for your community. This is completely your discernment. What's inappropriate or harmful varies from organization to organization and sometimes from place to place. Managing comments that aren't productive promptly is very essential for maintaining a safe online community. Always reinforce the importance of respectful discourse and adherence to your established community guidelines. And finally, I encourage you to embrace the block button. Sometimes a conversation just is not worth it, or a person is too disruptive to your online spaces. Or if you're dealing with bots and spam accounts, they can disrupt the flow of genuine conversation. So use that block button and liberally to maintain a positive and safe online community. By adhering to these 7 principles, your organization can navigate online interactions effectively, foster a supportive community, and contribute to the greater good in the digital realm. And again, I know that was a lot of information, but you can find it all in our digital detox guide, linked on the side.
Awesome. Thanks, Akia. So when you lay it out in a presentation or in a guide, it all sounds very straightforward and easy. And oh yeah, of course, but we know that real life is not like that at all. And so yeah, hopefully this is like helpful way to just sort of like break things down in a simple way to make it less toxic or complicated feeling. But yeah, definitely we're here for the rest of our time to just hear comments, answer any questions, or if you have like scenarios in your own work and life that you're trying to figure out as well. Anyone? And if we don't, that's great. But we'll hang out for a while. Oh, interesting. As so um as a government agency, we're not allowed to block trolls due to amendment violations. That is interesting, I guess. I don't know if you have anything to add, Zakia. I mean, I think ignore is probably the only appropriate option then in that case. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
I would say disengage and ignore, or mute if that isn't an amendment violation, but generally I would not engage.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, there is, I think on Twitter X, whatever we're calling it these days too, there's like a hide function. So I think if that is something that's available, like I would say do the most that you can within the legal guidelines. All right, in our Q&A here, we've got, is it okay to allow people to argue amongst themselves in our comments? I'm gonna let you answer this one first, Sakia.
What an interesting question. Um, in my own experience doing rural digital organizing, arguments in the comment section were very common. And as policy, especially if one of our members were involved in trying to steer that conversation in a productive way, we would just let that conversation play out. I would say that if you have somebody who is trusted, or an ally to your organization that can steer that conversation or is willing to jump into the fray, I think it's okay to let people argue amongst themselves. However, if the argument is between people who may be strangers to you and your online community, I might nip that in the bud very quickly, um, by either deleting comments or hiding comments, or disabling folks from adding comments who are bickering in the comments.
Yeah, I think this is a place where like having those community guidelines can be really helpful because if you're like, if like kind of having an understanding for yourself or your organization, what constitutes like a direct personal attack or hate speech or something like that. Because if it's like a dialogue about disagreement, that seems fine. But if it's like foul language or insults or that kind of things, just being able to point to that and being like, hey, we're like this isn't like we're not gonna let that fly. It's a good rule. I'm gonna do this other Q&A one in the Q&A and then we'll go back to the chat because I know there's a lot going on there. I've heard a rule to only reply once because any engagement is good, but limit yourself to just one reply so you don't get into a fight. Any thoughts, Sakia?
I think that's great advice. I think that goes back to what we suggested as well of restating values very clearly and being seen restating your values and then disengaging afterward. Now, I would say that if the engagement is coming from someone who is genuinely curious and they have a follow-up question, I do think it's okay to continue the conversation because we do want to create an online community that feels very conversational, very open, and very like interconnected. But only responding once, I think, is generally a good rule if you're not sure where people lie on in the quadrants.
Yeah, great opportunity to restate a position or a link to a page on your site with more info as well. All right, heading back to the chat, I see Elena, as a journalist, sometimes it's difficult to interact with the audience and block them. I think I mean I'm curious if there's more to expand on this, but I think when we are saying embrace the block button, what we're meaning, and Zakia chime in if I'm not articulating this correctly, but like you can kind of, if you're going through that kind of like Turing test where you're like, okay, this is a bot, this is just a troll. It's like blocking without interaction for those accounts to kind of get them out of your, if you can or if you want to like sort of like get them out of your feed as much as possible. If you're deciding to take some step to like engage with someone, I think then blocking them is like probably not the right call unless it turn like becomes something like really nasty. And then I think it's okay to say, like, I am blocking this because so other people can see like what happened. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, if you're like interacting with someone and then blocking them, it ends up you're like trying as a journalist, you're trying to like create a dialogue with your work, and so you have an audience and all that. So I understand that as well. Um yeah, hard to distinguish. And people take advantage of it. I think it's very true. Yeah, it is difficult. Um, any suggestions for combating disinformation such as climate and drought denial, or water resource conspiracy theorists? Yeah, misinformation is a huge issue online right now. I think I don't have like a great sense of how like actually good some of the like I think the social media companies are not doing an awesome job at combating misinformation, and honestly it should be like on them. I think what I would suggest is like you're in general not going to be changing the mind of someone engaging in mis or disinformation, but you can use it as an opportunity to like dissuade other people by sharing links to factual information. Um, that said, it's like if someone's just like I mean, disinformation, like we had it as part of that sample community guideline of something that like wouldn't be tolerated on like the community of our online community is just as one example. So that is an option to think about. But I think if you're particularly, I think if I'm remembering correctly, you're coming from like a water authority, like that is kind of just an opportunity to like not really change that person's mind, but make sure that like the I think of a nice way to say this. Non-conspiracy theorists who are reading and following along with you get the right information. One thing I'll do to follow up, and I should have had this on hand, is we have some friends and colleagues who work at a coalition that's focused on climate disinformation, and I think they do have some good resources and tools for strategies to kind of counteract that. So I will find that and I will make sure to include a resource around that specifically in the follow-up email that we send to everyone who registered. So hopefully we can provide a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to pass this one over to Zakia, but I'm going to read it out loud. We get a lot of political candidates and politicians who engage with us, and sometimes their comments are misinformed. But as a 501c3, we're not supposed to have political preferences. So deleting them could look like censorship of a political party or political leanings. Not sure what to do or if you have any advice on that.
I do have some personal experience with this one. So for the rural organization that I worked for, we were a 501c3, a 501c4, and also an IUPAC. And so there were times where we could have direct, political endorsements or speak very directly on our local, state, and federal politicians. But oftentimes when we engaged with like local politicians that would also comment on our page with misinformation, we use that as an opportunity to create a new resource or write a blog or a piece about the misinformation itself. And so it doesn't seem like a personal attack or a political preference, but more so advocating for everyone's right to, the truth, to correct information, and to fact. Um, and it is tricky um, to not like specifically name like the politician or the person who was commenting, especially as a 501c3. But we always made like a resource or a training session out of it. And so that just became more content. So I would say like walking that line is tricky, but taking the opportunity to address a very specific type of misinformation, creating a blog, a fact sheet, or something that people who are interested in factual information um, actually get a takeaway that doesn't necessarily address the comment itself, but does address the content so that it's a little more hands off.
Yeah, education is never political, but we all know that distinction isn't always how people take it. I'm sure there's the case where folks are using a tactic of like stirring the pot at the, you know, with your organization as kind of the pot to be stirred to generate engagement for themselves. And that's like unfortunate, but is certainly something. So I think I agree with you that like deleting or censoring candidates will come across that way, even if they're wrong. So just having I think I liked that like one reply kind of rule someone else had shared earlier where you're like, that's actually not true. Find out the real story here and link to something on your site and then just like not engage further is probably what I would do. But yeah, this is where it's like these rules seem really straightforward and then you get into real life and you're like, what do I do? I see that Jessica is one of our colleagues here at the Water Hub. Thank you, Jessica, had shared some tips on hiding offensive comments on Instagram. So hopefully that's useful. I don't actually know the answer to this. Are there any AI tools that can automate some of this?
I'm not sure of the like existence of any AI tools that specifically cover like community management and like comment management. But I would lean on Jessica's advice to like manually filter some like common keywords that come up in comments that are often contentious. For example, at my previous organization, like we filtered out MAGA, we filtered out, like words that were constantly used in comments that were very contentious. Like they all had a similar theme to them. And so we were able to like sort of wrangle in those comments before they took off in the first place. Not sure about AI tools though.
Yeah, I don't know. We can look up and see if we see anything, but I don't know. I think I'll be honest, like for our accounts, like we have kind of a niche audience. So the Water Hub is like relatively small accounts, and we tend to work with a lot of kind of smaller NGO type organizations who like the number of kind of engagements that are coming in are within the realm of a person or a team being able to kind of like deal with individually. I think if you have a really big following or you are like a big national organization or government agency, like you're probably not able to actually interact with every comment that comes in on something that you're posting, and that's okay. I think it's usually a good idea to pick like one or two from each thing, like one that's really positive or one where there's like an opportunity to educate, and then kind of let the rest fall where they may, just based on like capacity of you or your team. That'd be my suggestion. I think that's what people try to do. Yeah. Anything else? These are really interesting scenarios.
Mhm.
um, I remember the first time many moons ago, I had like a letter to the editor. I was published in a newspaper. I was very excited. And someone in the comments, when comments were much more common on like newspaper forums at that time, called me a druid. And I think they meant it to be like a great insult, but I was like, I think I printed it out and like framed it and put it on my desk. I thought it was very funny. Um, I know. That's my fun story. But obviously, I've been called worse than that over time. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like, I'll be honest too, like women on the internet, there's a lot of really scary, gross things that go on. So your mileage may vary, and like I just like report stuff if you can, but I wouldn't hold my breath for any like actual action to be taken, which is really unfortunate. So, um, your your health and wellness comes first.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah. Anything else? We'll hang out for a minute. But yeah, feel free to hang out, ask more questions, hop off. And yeah, thank you so much for being engaged with us today. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful, and it's an unfortunate reality of the world that we live in, that this is something that we kind of have to deal with. Our corporate social media overlords are not making it easy on us, are they?
Certainly not.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
I guess I could have stopped that share a long time ago. All right. I think I'm gonna end our recording and close this out.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.